Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody.
Uh,
I'm sorry for this delay of a few minutes because
yeah.
I had to ask for the link. I think there was a problem with the link I had.
mm. So
Welcome,
shall
good morning, Dr. Kolge. Welcome.
shall we
Yes,
start?
Amit.
Shall we
Yes,
start?
please, let's start.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Department of History, Theoretical College, and IQAC, I welcome you all for this lecture series, which is being organized to celebrate the life, philosophy, and teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. This is not his. This is, we are celebrating his 150th birth anniversary, but also this is the 100th year of to celebrate the Gandhi's teaching of non-violence, and UNESCO has also declared this year as the International Year of Peace and Non-Violence. So, to celebrate the life of Mahatma Gandhi, we have organized this lecture series, this webinar series, where we have invited four distinguished speakers to elaborate us, to teach us about the life and philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. And in this process, we are fortunate enough to have Dr. Nishikant Kolge as one of our first speaker, inaugural speaker of this webinar series. So before taking too much time, I would request Riddhi and her teammate to continue with the proceedings and inaugurate the formal function. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Uh, on behalf of everyone, I would like to welcome everyone on the day one of the international webinar series organized by the History Department of Kirodimal College in collaboration with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell IQAC. Sir has really briefed it out very nicely, so we'll just begin with the further proceedings. So to begin with, I would like to invite our respected principal ma'am, Professor Vibha Singh Chauhan, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Riddhi. Um, my very warm welcome to everybody who is here today. And I extend congratulations, really warm congratulations to the Department of History and the IQAC cell to put these series of talks together in a very brief period of time. Dr. Amit Suman, who rejoined college back after finishing his term with the Tilmurti, uh, very recently, and it is perhaps only a week, I think it is a week or slightly over a week back, that I mentioned to him about a very successful conference on Gandhi he had organized at Teen Murti, and requested him to have something to celebrate the 150th year of Gandhi. And today also being declared at the International Peace Day. And I must say, I am extremely deeply impressed that he worked in an overdrive and he has a 5-day seminar in front of us. Needless to say, he could not have done it alone. It's the teachers of the history department, uh, students of history department. He has often told me how devoted and dedicated the students are. Unfortunately, I cannot name all of them, but I know some of them because of some letters that were written to me and so on. That Ishita, Jishnu, Riddhi are some names that I know. But forgive me for not mentioning other names. I'm sure by the next talk I would be knowing many more students. But this is a really big credit to them. The whole Department of History, including the teacher in charge, Dr. Ajit Jha, and all the other members, and IQAC cell, which is a kind of an overall umbrella body to attempt to improve the academic and administrative performance and to collaborate with other stakeholders outside college. The convener, Anshu, Dr. Anshu, and all the other members also got their heads together and put in this series of talks. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw the program, a beautifully designed poster. And so my expectations have really gone up. And I'm going to push History Department further to have further programs. As far as the topic is concerned now, my feeling is that Mahatma Gandhi actually is an epical figure. And there are many definitions of an epic. One of the most accepted one is something that people may not have read, may not have studied, but they know about. So if one asks, have you read Mahabharata? Have you read Ramayana? The two great epics from this country? Many people may say, well, no, not really. But the moment you mention the characters, they say, of course, this is the story, this is what happened, and this is what happened. And this is one of the ways of identifying epics. Now, with Mahatma Gandhi, if I ask history, I'm sure history students, of course, may have read, and teachers have read, must have read his original writings also. But those who haven't, even they know about Mahatma Gandhi. And they know quite a bit about Mahatma Gandhi. And therefore, in my mind, he's like one of those figures who just carry on from generation to generation. And not just in this country. He is still today seen as a world leader. And I have had the experience, I'm also pretty, what should I say, old in academics and in my life. So I have had the experience of hearing people from the range of actually Nelson Mandela himself. I was in Cape Town and I heard him speak. And the former president of Venezuela, Chavez, they belong to completely different kind of politics. But both of them started their lecture with Gandhi and said whatever they wished to say. So Martin Luther, our own leaders, Gandhi, of course, I also have a personal take on Gandhi, which, like lots of things, keeps evolving. And when one finds out or reads something and reads a representation, it keeps evolving. And but I do feel that Gandhi is a figure who one may disagree, agree, partially disagree, but he is definitely, he and his writings, his opinions, his life itself is very highly contested. So one can have any approach to Gandhi, but it's difficult to ignore Gandhi. And to a large extent, we know him through his own writings. And he wrote from the most public areas to his most private spaces. And from South Africa to India to Manchester, Gandhi is still remembered. You go to Manchester, you would see that Gandhi is remembered. You go to South Africa, you see Gandhi is remembered. There is no very strong uniform opinion about his approach to politics, morality, ethics. Even he's written about food, he's written about agriculture, he's written about economics, he's talked about it, and many, many areas. And so I think it was long overdue, and I'm glad that it is happening through our two big units in Karodimal College. And I am really happy that we have our first inaugural speaker who is going to speak on his life and philosophy of Gandhi. He is Dr. Nishikant Kolge. And very warm welcome, Dr. Kolge. And we are looking forward to listen to you. And Dr. Kolge, he will be introduced in detail later, but I found that he is much traveled. I mean, he from Northeast to South India to the West. He has been officially associated in different positions with different institutions. I'm sure he has been to absolute north also in some way or the other, like the travels. Perhaps not the same journey as Gandhi, but he is a much traveled academician, and now in CSDS, close to our university. And he will talk of certain aspects of Gandhi, and his work, as I understand, is focused on the issue of caste. And this issue itself, he is the best person to talk about it, but this issue itself cannot be isolated from all other discourses of society, economics, ethics, religion, humanity, humane, and religion, and so on and so forth. So it's a complex category, and we are looking forward to listen to Dr. Kolge. I am a literature person, and through these 4 or 5 days, I hope to bring in some representations of Gandhi in literature and how deeply literature over the world, and especially in India, is impacted by Gandhi. And but that on another day. And I welcome all of you again, and thank you very much for making this a reality. It is almost like a dream becoming true. So everybody, if I have missed out anybody's name, I'm very poor at that, and please, I apologize, but my thanks are extended to each and everybody who is involved with this seminar, people who are attending it, people who are participating in it in any way. Thanks very much, and have a very good conference. Thank you.
We really appreciate you being with us, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Further, I would like to invite our respected professor, Mr. Sanjay Verma, who is also a senior faculty member at the Department of History, Kirodimal College, to address the students and the faculty members.
First of all, a very good morning to all of you, and a special good morning to the principal of our college, who mooted this idea to one of our young colleagues, and the department, along with the department and the college students, organized a series of webinars, and we are happy that we are a part of that. I must also be thankful to Dr. Nishikant Kolge for having agreed to give us this, to take this, to address us on this particular occasion. What inspires me most, that at a time when every passing day the relevance of this great man becomes more relevant, we are discussing this man, his life, his work, his philosophy, which I think is very important. We must congratulate ourselves. We must congratulate ourselves that we are a part of this webinar. Because if we look around the times, look around us and the time around us, we have people going to parliament who celebrate his assassination. At such time, this man we want to discuss, Gandhiji, is a great achievement for us. We must congratulate ourselves for that, and we must congratulate scholars like Kolge, who still are working on such topics, because I think that much before world ever came to acknowledge the issues related to multiculturalism. Gandhi was addressing that in India. He was addressing that in South Africa, much before this multiculturalism became a fashionable word in academics and in journalism. So this man was much ahead of his time. This man, I'm always referring this man, I fear to take his name, is Gandhiji. He was much ahead of his time. He had, well, as our principal said, he is understood, partially misunderstood. One may agree, one may disagree, but that is not the issue. The question is, are we still engaging with his ideas? And today I can very safely say that not only us, but a lot younger generation, these students of Kirorimal College, taking such an interest in this particular person's life, his philosophy, his work. Many congratulations to all of you. I congratulate myself also. I am a part of your department. Congratulations to Amit. Congratulations to IQAC. It is the history department, my colleagues in the history department, students there. You're all doing a good job. And I do not want to, stand between you and Dr. Kolge, because I did not know much about him. I read one of his articles without reading the name there, that who is the author of that artist, or the author of that particular article. That article, if I am not mistaken, Dr. Kolge, is that was Gandhi a casteist? And I really am looking forward to this particular lecture. I don't want to stand between you and him. Please, I welcome him also, Dr. Kolge. Please, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Further, I would like to request Dr. Anshu ma'am to come up and say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be part of this beautiful journey, this international webinar. And IQAC is really, really proud to associate with the Department of History for this particular collaborating with the department on celebrating Gandhi Jayanti and organizing this webinar. And I wish to place on record my gratitude to Dr. Amit Suman, who, as Principal Ma'am said, in such a short time, he managed to contact these scholars from across the world for this international webinar, to speak to all of us, to the students of Kirorimal College, the research scholars, not just from Delhi or Delhi University, but from across the country. I think we've had over more than 200 registrations for this webinar. And there are, as ma'am has already briefed, that there are 4 talks, 4 lectures, and then on the last day, Gandhi Gatha, in which the participants are going to be interacting with each other and saying their bit of what they learned in this webinar. So I'd like to thank, of course, the history department, our principal ma'am, who is always motivating us to take on these challenges and new thoughts in which we can give our students something new. Plus, as everybody has said, Gandhiji is our own. And the topic, his relevance, yes, how relevant he is. I mean, like, he's still relevant and very, very relevant. And so we are going to be talking about it and listening to these great, eminent personalities. Dr. Kolge from, of course, from very close to our college only, from CSDS. Then from Professor Douglas Allen, then Professor Faisal, and Professor Priyankar. So I think we are really, really fortunate to have gotten on this platform these scholars. And I'm sure all of us are going to enjoy all these 4 days of the webinar. I want to again thank everybody for being here, and I hope that all the students and scholars and teachers and the faculty members from the college and other places will be joining each day and interacting with these personalities. Thanks a lot, and over to you, Riddhi.
May I just interrupt for a moment? Before we go on, I think it will be a good idea if participants just switch off their audios and videos. Only those who speak can switch on their video. We'll be able to hear much better. All of us will be better off. So may I request you to kindly do that?
Sure, ma'am, we'll make sure. Further, I would like to thank Anshu, ma'am, for coming on behalf of IQAC. She is also a convener at IQAC. Next, moving ahead, I would like to request Shambhavi to take over and introduce us to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Nishikant Kolge, sir.
Good morning, everyone. It is with utmost pleasure that we welcome Dr. Nishikant Kolge as our esteemed guest speaker for the day. A prominent Gandhian scholar, Dr. Kolge has previously taught at the Department of History, University of Tripura. He joined the Center for the Study of Developing Societies in 2018. In his PhD work in the Department of Humanities and Social Science at IIT Madras, he has examined Gandhi and his strategy to abolish caste system in India. A number of his research articles have been published in leading national and international journals. In his celebrated book, Gandhi Against Caste, he has analyzed the entire range of what Gandhi said and wrote about caste divisions in India. With a delighted heart, we welcome and look forward to his lecture today on the theme Understanding the Life and Philosophy of Gandhi. Meanwhile, the attendees are requested to type their questions or names in the chat box. We will be taking up the questions at the end of the lecture. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Sambhavi, I think that's what. I'm
Yes.
very. Thank you, Sam. I'm happy to be here at Kerodimal College. Uh, After joining CSDS, I have some very rare, very few occasions to interact with the student, and I always love to have session or class with the students. So it is also a good opportunity for me. I think I requested Dr. Amit that due to health I may not speak a longer. I might speak 30 minutes or so. But before coming to my topic, I thought I'll say a few introductory remark on the 2 point, one made by the Dr. Amit and another made by Professor Chauhan, the principal ma'am. Uh, to just begin with, yes, it's true that today Gandhi's birthday is celebrated as a non-violence day. But I want to highlight here that the tradition of non-violence is very old in India. It's go back to more than 2-3 thousand years back. So we have a Buddhism, Jainism, which emphasize on non-violence as a personal virtue, and they have very strict rules and regulation to practice related to the non-violence. Even Gandhi's idea of non-violence as a personal virtue has a lot of limitation. He provides some exception in practice of non-violence. In one of my article, I highlighted the 5 exception Gandhi allow to the practice of the non-violence. So, what I wanted to say that Gandhi has not uh, much to add in the philosophy of non-violence, because we have a long history and tradition of to understand non-violence and this different thing. But the one of the but important contribution what Gandhi made is that to introduce non-violence as a method, as a strategy, or as a science, to solve the socio-economic and political problem of our time. This is the contribution, I believe, of Gandhi with respect to the idea of non-violence. Where earlier non-violence was a personal virtue, but Gandhi introduced a non-violence as a strategy, as a method, or as a science. He used to say science in making, to solve our socio-economic problem, political, all type of problem, conflicts, uh, 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 starting from the personal conflict to the international levels, conflict between two nations. So earlier we have only a violence method to address all these issues, and I believe when we discuss, we remember Gandhi and his idea of non-violence, we should remember that for him, though for him at the personal level, he accepted non-violence is a very important virtue, and if you practice it, you will become more equipped to use it in the socio-political and economic field. But his contribution, important contribution, lie in presenting us non-violence as a method, as a strategy, or as a science to solve conflict, different type of conflict. And I believe we should pay much more attention to understand such methods, to understand this science, to what Gandhi used to call satyagraha, science in making. We need to do progress in ways to understand how the non-violence can help us to resolve this conflict. This is one just I wanted to make remark at the beginning, that and it will give an idea how I look at Gandhi also. Again, the principal man says that Gandhi become like a epic figure. It's true that we see him everywhere. We have his statues are everywhere, and there are a lot of references in primary books and secondary books and in different syllabus, from our prime minister to the chaiwala. Everyone speak of Gandhi and say one on another thing about him. Though, as ma'am rightly said, most of them might not have read him, but they know about him, and they have their own ideas about what Gandhi is and stood for him. So we see him every day on currency and all that. But this is only familiarity. But familiarity does not mean that we know about him. So knowing is a different from the familiarity. And it's very rightly ma'am said that the familiarity will not take us very long. We need to critically engage with him. We need to read him, understand him, to have a better understanding of his work, contribution, and relevance for us. So what today I'm going to do? It's a very brief, short lecture. I'm going to say 4 or 5 points only, very briefly. So what I'm going to say you, I'm going to propose uh, some ways which can help us to understand the life and philosophy of Gandhi. So I'm not telling that these are the guiding principle to know the true Gandhi. That's not the purpose. What I'm trying to say that last 12 year, I have been reading Gandhi as a student, and what are the difficulties I have faced to understand his writing, his life and action, and how try to resolve it. So these are the uh, suggestions one may keep in mind while reading Gandhi, and it helped me, and I believe it may also help other if they keep this suggestion in mind. So these are the, there is no claim that by following this suggestion you may reach or you may understand the true Gandhi. This is not the suggestion. What I'm requesting, uh, this is my personal experience, what I face while reading Gandhi, and how I resolve those problems and contradiction, and it helped me, and it might help you as well. So these are the primarily suggestions one should keep in mind while they are trying to read or understand Gandhi and his action. So my first suggestion is that the mixture was the essence. So we can see, we will find actually dramatically opposite two view of Gandhi. So one view says that Gandhi was a Mahatma, and they said that those who believe him Mahatma, they will say that the greatness of Gandhi is more in his holy living than his heroic struggle. They will say that his moral life was more important than his other contribution. For him, actually, Gandhi is basically a Mahatma, a great human being who live a very religious and moral and spiritual life. And they said that this is the primary contribution to the humanity, and we should look at carefully about how Gandhi lived or developed his moral principle. But there are the other view which may be equally true, that people believe that Gandhi was a shrewd politician, and this is and it is not wrong to see, and it is wrong to see him only a person of high moral status. So another group of people says that Gandhi was actually a very shrewd politician, and he used all kind of strategy which any politician can use in the field of politics. And this is, if we will emphasize on his moral life, we will tend to forget what are the achievement he has done in field of the politics. This scholar also argue that it is through his political strategies actually he attracted the millions of people in his struggle, not through his moral life. Actually he attracted to attracted lots of people into the political field. So we have two different kind of views, where one group of people consider him as a great Mahatma who lived a very high standard moral life, and there is another group of people who believe that Gandhi was a shrewd politician who made all kind of strategy to win the political battles. So, but what I am arguing that we have created this false dichotomy between Gandhi the Mahatma and Gandhi the politician, because usually in our understanding frame of work, we think these are the two contradictory thing as cheese and chalk, and moral person are not expected to be a politician and made some strategies, and politicians are not expected to be remain moral because they have to compromise on the different level at the for their own political advantage. So, but I am arguing that in the manner in which these two are closely intertwined in Gandhi's thought and action made him unique. For him, it was not enough to only make a strategy against the opponent, but this strategy has to be made on the strong moral ground. For him, only formulating strategy is not enough. Yes, but that is the part of the political or life or social life, that you have to develop different strategies at the different level to solve or address the different problems. But for him, this strategy has to be built on the strong moral ground. So that's why actually he evolved as a unique combination of Mahatma, who had a highly moral and spiritual position that was a necessarily political, and as a shrewd political strategist who has a political position that was necessarily a spiritual. So it's known that for Gandhi, his political struggle were part of his ways to self-realization, or the see God face to face. And on the other hand, his prayer meetings and a prayer meeting and other spiritual activities were also part of his political movements. So actually, he did not make any distinction uh, bet, uh, between the two, and he could so he could evolve as a unique combination. And I just also want to add two more things, and then I will move to the second point, that why Gandhi could do these things, because unlike in Indian tradition, and many scholars have also tried to understand in that way, that when especially the Anthony Farrell, where he talk about the four type of swaraj autonomy. So he said, he defined different political uh, uh, autonomy as political autonomy, um, so uh, throwing British out of the country, and individual autonomy as self-realization or moksha. And he gave a slightly higher position to the spiritual freedom. He argued, and many scholars, and especially in Indian tradition also, we consider the spiritual life is more superior than this mundane, the family, political, and social economic life. But in field of Gandhi, in the scheme of Gandhi, actually Gandhi did not make such distinction. For him, spiritual is a political and political is a spiritual. That is why he actually he could evolve as a unique combination, as a spiritual man and as a shrewd politician, because he find both are equally necessary aspect of the life, and in both you need to equally participate in all the aspect of the life. So this is my first suggestions. Then what I'm also suggesting, that there is nothing wrong if you see Gandhi as a Mahatma or as a politician. You can have you can look at Gandhi as a Mahatma only or as a politician and make your own understanding about the Gandhi. But what I'm trying to say, if you see in this way, actually you miss the essence, that is something very intrinsic to the kind of person that was the Gandhi. So you actually, this is very essence to understand Gandhi. What is I'm proposing, you might able to see some aspect of Gandhi by seeing him as a Mahatma or and seeing him as a politician, but you will miss which is very intrinsic, very central, or very natural to the Gandhi. And if you want to see Gandhi in a totality, I will say you have to keep in mind that he was, the mixture was the sense. He was both Mahatma as a very high moral individual, and as well as a shrewd politician who makes strategy. As I told, actually non-violence is one of the best example. In 1942, to addressing the Congress, he said the non-violence is a creed for him, a breath of life, but he introduced non-violence to the Congress for solving the political problem. It was a strategy to address the political problem. So we need to keep, if we will keep this thing in mind, that Gandhi, the mixture was the both, and we cannot separate, or we cannot separate, or we cannot ignore one while understanding the other aspect of the Gandhi. We have to see him as a both. So this is what my first submission. And but this is also a, this understanding also create a problem, that if it is the case, how these two contradictory aspect can be you can be located in a one mind. What I just wanted to say, um, how we cannot just gloss over the dichotomy of Mahatma versus politician without explaining how these two contradictory aspects coexisted within a single ideological unit. So you have to resolve also that how these two contradictory thing works together in field of Gandhi. And for that, I'm proposing the second thing, that Gandhi lived a life of double standard. So what I'm saying, that Gandhi lived a very well defined double standard life. So generally, what is the common understanding of Gandhi? That Gandhi was a man of personal integrity. What we mean, that what he said actually he practiced. And one philosopher, Ramakrishna Rao, also writes, Gandhi's, I quote, Gandhi's life is an example of the Upanishad saying, to know Brahma is to be Brahma. In other words, in the Mahatma's life, knowing and being blended and masked in perfect harmony. There was no divorce between thought and action. So we generally appreciate, because what he said, priest he also practiced. But actually it is, if we accept this proposition, it is very problematic, and we may run the risk of misunderstanding Gandhi. In Gandhi, but before that, let me explain what I mean by the double standard. Double standard, I am generally, we understand double standard, that a morally weak person, he is preach moral values, but he is not able to practice those moral principles and values or teaching because of his weak morality. This is not the way I am using. If we use this way, it has a negative connotation. What I mean by double standard, that Gandhi lived a very high moral standard of life. He also articulated his movement on the basis of very high moral principle, but he allow of the dilution of these principle when he was organizing those social, political, and economic movements. So this is what I mean by living double standard. And Gandhi understood that the high moral values he has, principle he has set for himself, it may be very difficult for any ordinary satyagrahi or congress volunteer or anyone to practice. If he keep this is the condition to participate in his movement, he will not able to run the movement. So he allow, and in another way, I will give example from a book in relation with the caste system. It will open up the whole together new vista. But just I want to make some passing reference. For example, at the initial level, when he returned, Gandhi returned from South Africa in 1915-17. During this initial period, his political formation in India, Gandhi, many places, he said he opposed interdining and intercaste marriage on principle of hygiene and control or spirituality, something like that. And many occasions he said that. But the same time he will come in the ashram and interdine with the different faith of people or different caste of people. In his ashram, actually interdining was the part and parcel of the life. Even in marriage, though celibacy was practiced in his ashram, but many marriages were also performed. And in one of his son's marriage, he very openly says that the outside people are not yet ready for the radical reform of intercaste marriage, and it is our duty of the ashramite to encourage the intercaste marriage. If someone need a more detail, he or she can ask me during question answer session. So what I wanted to ask you, that Gandhi made this distinction, that he has a very moral standard for living for his own himself, but he realized that to bring those reform or changes in society, he has to wait or go slowly, because people may not be ready for such radical reform. I will give another small example and move to the next point, that for him also he has a different idea of the Swaraj, where he is talking in later part I will talk about it also, where he's talking about empowering the last man and developing the capacity of living in harmony and peace with each other. But he was not comfortable with the idea of just Swaraj means throwing the British out of the out of the country and accepting their ways of life, their methods of ruling country. He said that it is like that white babus were replaced by the sorry brown babus, but still he he participated in those struggle which led to the British go out of the country and establishment of the parliamentary Swaraj in accordance with the wish of the people. But he has a much more deeper understanding of the Swaraj. So, in brief, I will sum this point that I wanted to say that Gandhi has very high moral standard and the different understanding of the society and on politics and economics, and but he did not impose on the other, and he worked out in the society in the field of the politics according to the wish of the majority of the people. So that's we should also keep in the mind when Gandhi speak and write this distinction, this diction, and it will help us to understand Gandhi in a better way. Third point I wanted to make that we should keep in mind when we read Gandhi is that constructive program, or I will say the Poon Swaraj, was the core of Gandhi's life. So we know primarily Gandhi as a leader of our freedom struggle, and we know that one of the purpose of his life was to attain freedom for India. And even those who believe Gandhi was Mahatma and struggling for the self-realization, moksha, and to see God face to face, they also know, they also realize the importance of political struggle in Gandhi's life. They believe that this political struggle was also a part of Gandhi's process of attainment of self-realization. So we got a freedom, and for us the political freedom was important. I also us mean by historians and other scholars. So it was we actually in our imagination that the political movement and political independence was very important, and therefore we see Gandhi as a primary leader of political movement, and who was leading our struggles, and we see his life revolving around it. But what I am proposing, it is not necessary that Gandhi also saw his life in this way, in which that political struggle was the center of his life, and other things revolve around it. Suppose we historians and as a student also grown up to see his constructive program as a supplementary strategies. So as Vipin Chandra has explained it, that it was a method to keep masses volunteer and their enthusiasm high, and make them busy during the between the two direct confrontation with the state. So you have a non-cooperation movement and you have a civil disobedient movement, and in between you have a lot of time. So how to keep your volunteer engaged? Gandhi developed these constructive program. But it is not necessary that Gandhi also saw in the same fashion. Actually, I would read one quote from Gandhi. Gandhi says, I quote, "My work of social reform was in no way less or subordinate to political work. The fact is that when I saw that to a certain extent my social work would be impossible without the help of political work, I took to the later and only to the extent that it helped the farmer." So what Gandhi is proposing, that for him social work, which I'm talking about, telling the constructive program to build society. In constructive program, you have a removal of untouchability, Hindu-Muslim unity, charkha, and prohibition on drugs, leprosy, health, hygiene, and there are 19 constructive programs. So what I'm telling for Gandhi, this quote says that actually he is more interested in these constructive work, and he take interest on in politics only with if the politics is helpful in promoting this constructive work, and only to that extent that it help in promoting this constructive work. I know it's a very one quote cannot justify my argument, but if you see it along with what I have said, to understand of Gandhi Swaraj, you will understand that for Gandhi, this was more important than attainment of the political freedom. For Gandhi, Gandhi did not in his book uh, in his book Swaraj, Hindu Swaraj, he very explicitly says, "My patriotism does not allow me to crush my people or praja under the heel of the Indian princes and maharajas." And he said, if I can attend their welfare of the people in the hand of the Britishers, I will bow down to them. So he know very well that the Indian princess or Indian politician can be as cruel or as exploitative as the Britishers. So he was not much. He was it was one of his important aim, but he was not as much concerned to throwing the British out and just the an Indian some group of people may occupy the power and method of ruling. He was more concerned about the last man or making him capable. So for him, actually, the Swaraj means for the nation means collective capacity of individual to live together in peace and harmony. He believed for him when the independence or Swaraj cannot be imposed by any foreign rule or aligned rule from the above. For him, the Swaraj has to be nurtured from the ground. It is not top to bottom approach. It is bottom to top approach. Um, and I think Fred Delimer has explained it very well. He said Swaraj must first be nurtured through education at the local and village level, and then spread to larger community and to the world through the series of oceanic circle. So for Gandhi, empowering uh, making the individual capable of living peace and harmony within the community is a way to understand the Swaraj. And for these, actually, this was the constructive program that were designed to make an individual or community to live in peace and harmony. It was the constructive program that were designed to make a society peaceful and non-violent place to live. So that this is my next suggestion, that if we see that Gandhi was more concerned for these issues than the real politics which help to the transformation of the power, we will have a much better understanding of Gandhi's life and philosophy and contribution. As you also, many of you may know this famous thing that during the Independence Day, 15 August 1947, Gandhi was not in Delhi or was not in Lal Killa where Nehru was hosting the flag. He was not even in Delhi. He was in Calcutta to addressing the communal issue. And even when some reporter went and asked him to give a message on this important occasion, Gandhi actually denied he has no message for nation on this occasion, because he was concerned. His concern was not just to transformation of power. He was more concerned about the building society and building individual and making this place more non-violent and harmonious to live. And definitely the constructive programs were designed to build such society and individuals. So I will sum up this point by repeating my suggestion. Then we should see actually it was the constructive program that Gandhi called the Poon Swaraj, that was the center for the purpose of Gandhi's life, and we should see Gandhi's life as realizing or implementing these constructive programs, which will give us broader picture or proper understanding of Gandhi's life and philosophy. I think I'm taking, I have a time. So last 2 points I wanted to say. The Gandhi's practice should be considered first. So this is also an important point, especially because Gandhi's language is very problematic. And Gandhi himself confessed, he said, I quote, "My language is aphoristic. It lacks precision. It is therefore open to several interpretations," unquote. Gandhi himself said. And there are, uh, Joseph Leopold also said that it is not difficult to quote Gandhi against himself. You will find Gandhi saying one thing, and after some time he will say the another thing, and how to resolve these things. So the one famous approach which is present in the literature is that to see that Gandhi evolved over period of time. So one of the example I'll give from the Bipin Chandra. Bipin Chandra writes, I quote, "Many quote Gandhi's statement on caste system, interdining, interreligious dining and marriages, and so on, from his early writings. But the fact is that while his basic commitment to the human values, truth and non-violence remained constant, his opinion on all these and other issues underwent changes, sometimes drastic and invariably in more radical direction." So this is one of the accepted uh, argument that Gandhi evolved over period of time, and no one can reject this argument. As a human being, everyone evolve, everyone change his positions on less important and more important as what is more important and less important issue on issues. So we cannot deny that anyone is not evolving. So Gandhi was a human being. He evolved. He also evolved over period of time, and he also says a couple of times that his latest statement should be seen as a final. I quote Gandhi. Gandhi says, "In my search after truth, I have discarded many ideas and learned many new things. And therefore, when anybody finds any inconsistency between any two writings of mine, if he has still faith in my sanctity, he would do well to choose the later of the two on the same subjects." So Gandhi also said indirectly that he evolved over a period of time, and he changed his in his search after truth. Actually, he discarded many ideas and accepted new ideas, and it's very natural. But you may be surprised in the same paragraph. Actually, Gandhi is saying, sorry, that this is advice for those who find inconsistency in my writing. Actually, he is denying any kind of inconsistency. So I will read the whole para, and then you will able to understand what I'm trying to say. So Gandhi writes in the same paragraph where he said he discarded many new ideas and learned many new things in his search after truth. He writes, I quote, "Whatever I have been, whenever I have been obliged to compare my writing, even of 50 years ago, with the latest, I have discovered no inconsistency between the two." He's saying, I have discovered no inconsistency between two. But friends who observe inconsistency will do well to take the meaning that my latest writing may yield, unless or of course they prefer the old. But he had, but before making the choice, they should try to see if there is not an underlying and abiding consistency between the two seemingly inconsistency. So actually Gandhi is denying that there is any kind of inconsistency on the major inconsistency he's telling, and he remain constant. But we cannot deny it. We have his writing, and over different period of time he made the different statement, especially about the caste interdining and intercaste marriage and untouchability. So how will make sense of these things? So what I am suggesting that Gandhi himself also said, what you do not get from my conduct, you will not get from my words. So what Gandhi also said, as a matter of fact, my writing should be criminated with my body. So what he is suggesting, he is not suggesting that his writing should not be taken seriously. He's not suggesting that his writing should be taken seriously, but what he is suggesting, if there is a contradiction or inconsistency appeared in his writing, we should resolve in light of his practice. So we should see his practice to resolve this inconsistency, and by seeing his practice, we can make a much better sense of his opinion on the different issues, rather than entangled in his writings. So his writing should be taken seriously and understand and analyzed properly. But when you find that inconsistency and difference of opinion, we should verify or check with his practice. That is what he is suggesting, and I am also suggesting that this may be that may help us to better understand Gandhi. Gandhi also says, I will close this point after reading this Gandhi's quote. He said, I quote, to understand what I say, one need to understand my conduct, unquote. So this was my fourth suggestion, that if we want to make sense of what Gandhi's life, or what was his philosophy, what he stood for, so we should read his writing carefully. But if there is a conflict and there is inconsistency, we should resolve in light of his practice. So now my last suggestion is, which I will wind up in 2 minutes, that Gandhi had his own perspective. So we see there are the several studies which suggest that Gandhi was influenced by the Western philosopher like Leo Tolstoy, Henry David Thoreau, and John Ruskin. And there are also scholars who says that Gandhi was non-Western, Eastern, and spiritually grounded and unique Indian political thinker. So you see that Gandhi, there are the also scholar made attempt to understand is a Orthodox Hindu, or some says that he was also influenced by Buddhist or Christianity. Even Hinduism, he is also is understood as a Advaita, where is non-dualism is accepted, and also Vaishnavi, where God is seen in a form, means in a varieties of ways. People try to understand. In field of politics, also political thinker, also he is considered as an anarchist, individualist, and so in so many he is considered as a liberal, revolutionary, nationalist, cosmopolitan, socialist, anarchist. But what I'm trying to suggest, that Gandhi was his own kind. So Gandhian is his own philosophy, and if we are going to compare it with any kind of political position or philosophy or religious ways, so we are going to miss what very intrinsic to the Gandhi. Gandhi need to be understood in his own terms. If you will make any kind of comparison, we will not able to properly understand, because his philosophy is open-ended and hermeneutic in nature, and it is make difficult to treat him as a representative of any kind of a known form of philosophical stream. So Gandhi has his own ways to understand, and this was actually uh, he has his own original position. That's why he was freely able to borrow from the different Eastern, Western philosophy and make his own perspective. So that is what my last submission, that Gandhi should be understand in his own term. Any kind of comparison or any kind of seeing the similarity with any already known philosophy or political position may not help us to understand Gandhi better. So this is what my final submission. I just repeat all the point and then stop speaking. My first suggestion was that the mixture was the essence. We should see Gandhi both as a Mahatma and as well as a shrewd politician if we want to really understand what is very intrinsic to the Gandhi. We can make sense of some of his act by seeing Gandhi as a Mahatma or as a politician, but we want to have a holistic idea. We have to see that the mixture was the essence. Second, that he make a distinction. He can have the high moral life. He can have a different understanding of the political philosophy or social life, but he can work in consensus, or he can compromise with those ideas and work what actually majority of people want. So there is a double standard in his life. Third is the constructive program. We should not overemphasize on his political achievement or see him primarily as a political leader, because for him Swaraj means entirely different thing, empowering the individual, and we should see what are those program he introduced for making the society peaceful and non-violent. And last is practice should be considered first. Whenever there is a conflict in his writing, there is an inconsistency in his writing, we should resolve in the light of his practice. And Gandhi has his own perspective. Thanks for listening me peacefully. And I stop here. And if there are questions, I would try to respond to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful words. We will now take the questions. There are some questions in the chat box. The first question is by Agam Jha. Would you like to unmute and ask your question, or should I read it out for you?
Yeah, I think if we allow person to ask the question, that would be the I feel. But you are free to follow your own ways of preference.
Mr. Agam Jha, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Okay, so I'll ask.
I request the people, to those who are going to ask the questions, first please introduce yourself and then continue with your question.
Thank you, Rima. Good suggestion.
Okay, so since he is not responding, I'll just speak out the question. As far as social reform is concerned, had Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi the same thought?
Ambedkar and Gandhi has the same. No, they have a different ways to address the problem, and there were the differences in their way of understanding the problem also. The simple way, like untouchability for Gandhi was sin, but for Ambedkar it was a crime. So Ambedkar understood in a different ways and Gandhi understood in a different ways, but both try to annihilate or solve the problem in a different way. But I will not say one understanding is better than the other understanding. And overall eradication of the untouchability or caste system, I think both methods are important. That is what I mean.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by Altaf sir. Altaf sir, would you like to unmute?
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful talk. And I just want to know your view on, a very interesting and very debated issue on the issue of separate electorate, caste, and untouchability, and intense, debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar on these issues. What is your own take on this issue, particularly the issue of untouchability, the issue of separate electorate, and how Gandhi look at untouchability and how Ambedkar look at untouchability? Please, what is your take on this debate, larger debate?
Sorry, I forget your name, but you have asked the range of the questions, and I think there is required a series of lectures too. So I would request you, if you are really seriously interested, to look at my take on all these several issues. You can look at my book Gandhi Against Caste. But in brief, I would say, as I have answered in the previous question, I believe that Gandhi was also very sincerely sincerely trying to annihilate the caste, not only removal of untouchability. I'm telling the caste / the Varnashram Dharma in his own ways. His method has some limitation and some merits, as any other person's method can has. But I don't question his sincerity, and I believe he maybe in some occasion was wrong in addressing the caste issue or untouchability, but he has his methods, his approach, and it has some importance. And definitely, as I said, his method was different with the Ambedkar's approach. But I won't, as I said earlier, I won't say that one method is superior and another method is inferior, or one understanding is better than the another. Both, because in brief sense, Ambedkar, caste was a kind of social, economic, and political structure. For Gandhi, it was a state of mind, and actually caste is both, and it has to be eradicated from the both from the society also as a structure, hierarchical structure, and as well as from the mind of the people. So I will say both complement to each other. And again, with one line I will close. I don't question Gandhi's intention. He was very serious for abolishing the caste system. Shambhavi, I am not able to listen to you.
I'm so sorry. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would like to invite Dr. Vikas Gupta, sir, for the next question. He has a couple of questions. So, Dr. Vikas Gupta, sir.
Okay, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Nishika, I have, like these three almost interrelated kind of questions. The first one is about, this distinction that we, the academicians, have been making between the social life, political life, religious life. Whether really Gandhi had any such sense of distinctions. So that is my first thing. And the second is, I got some sense from your presentation and also from your book, as if you're saying that Gandhi is gradually but deliberately moving gradually, like taking some moderate position initially, and then subsequently, coming up with more radical ideas on caste. Now, is it something really deliberate, or this is something that Gandhi is learning under the pressure from Dalit movement, including his interaction with Ambedkar? And the third interrelated again thing is, that believing in some kind of strategy from going radical, moderate to radical, has also this, anxiety that from the beginning, otherwise we see in Gandhi a very stubborn attitude, very stubborn attitude. He refused to, get this Shuddhi performed, and the manner he took back the non-cooperation movement. He's been very, very stubborn. You know, I mean, he hardly, I think, bothered whether people are with him or not. He always took very hard moral stand. So these are the three, you know, kind of interrelated, you know, concerns that I had, in case you want to shed any light on.
Sure, sure. It's a nice. Thank you. Thanks for the nice question. If I forget questions, please do remind me. So first question, yes, I'm a firm believer of that Gandhi actually did not make any distinction between any aspect of the life. He saw life as a whole, and not only saw life as a whole and did not make any distinction, he did not create any hierarchy also, as I have said. I strongly believe for Gandhi, spiritual life is not superior than political or social life. For him, life as a whole. His political activities, as I told, was part of achieving the moksha, and his religious practices, prayers, meeting were part of his political life. So definitely, for my understanding, for Gandhi, there is no distinction what is social, what is moral, what is political, as we did. Even take one simple example, I think some scholar has quoted that he don't make distinction between the philosophy like Advaita or Vaishnavi. He may not believe in the temple or ideal worshipping, but he will accept that for the other people it may be required, and he will defend that temples are idol worship are important part of the people worship. He will say that eventually we need to overcome. But sorry, let me come back to the point. In brief, I believe he did not make any distinction as we do, and he do not make any kind of hierarchy in the different aspect of the life. Your second question, I'll say that yes, you rightly said that in my book, I try to argue, and my book give an example that these changes from moderate to radical is a deliberate, and have given some justification from because in his practice he remained consistent, and some from the evidence from the some writing. I still hold this is my position, and I say, but I am not denying that people evolve over a period of time. He must have impact on some impact on the Dalit movement, Ambedkar presence, and maybe there are some other pressure within the Congress, or there may be several reasons for changing his position and for his evolving. So let's me put it in the, it may be the mixed baggage. He evolved also, but it was also a part of his strategy to go from moderate to the extremist. When he need to shift, how need to shift also, I said in my book that determined according to the exigency of the situation, what situation permit. In brief, I am repeating my argument, what I have said in book. I believe that it was deliberate, and it doesn't mean that there was no evolution. There was evolution also. And sorry, your third question I forget. Can you? I think you did one mistake. If you have read my book, actually, sorry, I cannot listen you, Dr. Vikas Gupta. Dr. Vikas Gupta, I cannot listen. You are not audible.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Amit sir, would you please unmute?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm saying, in a way, you have already linked the response to question 2 and 3 together. Yeah. But that really provokes, in fact, the other kind of situation, which is that even if we agree, I mean, going beyond what you have written in the book, you're also agreeing to the fact that, you know, he's also evolving. You know, you have quoted Gandhi himself. On the other hand, if we see the republication of Hind Swaraj from 1909 to, I think, the second one came in 1937 or 1939, I don't remember.
Yes.
But the only single word that Gandhi changes is for the British Parliament, and that too on the request of a British woman. Yeah, nothing he changes over there. Nothing.
Yes, yes. See, let me tell you one thing which I forgot to tell you earlier, and then come to your this question. You said about the Shuddhi. No, in initial, actually, he was actually from the very beginning he opposed Shuddhi. If you have read my book, you will say actually this is one of the important point I make in my book, that Gandhi was more radical in annihilating the caste system than anyone else, because he opposed the Shuddhi movement, because Shuddhi movement is based on the which help, because in Shuddhi movement what you allow a group of people or individual to go through the ceremony uh, and uh, and have a little slightly higher place within the caste system. It did not destroy or annihilate the caste system. Actually, it strengthened the idea of Shuddhi movement. Actually, strengthened the caste system because it's built on the acceptance of the Brahmanical values and culture. On the other hand, Gandhi rejected. He said, we don't want this Shuddhi movement. We want the otherwise. The upper, so-called upper caste should reject their superiority and accept their place with Dalits. So actually, he is rejecting the Brahmanical values and tradition on which this idea of Shuddhi built. And I argue that this is one of the most radical position he has taken. So this is one thing I want, and even I have a slightly disagreement with you to say that is very innocent sentence to say that he was very stubborn and he withdraw movement on only very high moral ground. No, that there was a political consideration. I am telling you, if you if you have read some of, I don't means we history a student generally read, there is a Rajni Pamdad or Bipin Chandra, they give explanation that it was a part of deliberate strategy to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. It was not very innocent act, because his commitment towards the non-violence and people become violent, so he withdraw the. I have a. If you want, and you drop me your email, I will give one article. Actually, it is a response to one of reviewer, where she also make the same point, and I told that it was not an innocent act. Yes, for him, as I said in my presentation, for him. To develop strategy is important, but it has to be on the moral ground. But he was not that innocent man that he will withdraw the movement just because of upholding certain moral principle. If you time permit, I would say also a little bit few more things. Actually, in Gandhi's one of the important pillar of Gandhi's philosophy is that he understands human beings are limited. They cannot self-realize within this body. They cannot attend the moksha in this body. In the same way, he understood the no moral principle can be fully practiced within this body, and this limitation is the framework within which we have to work. And therefore it allows certain kind of experiment and certain kind of you call it experiment or call it a strategy or call it method. So in that way what you are referring is a half Gandhi, that is a Mahatma who rejected who withdraw the movement because on the high moral ground. But I'm telling to see the whole Gandhi. There is a politician Gandhi who know that was important to withdraw for the certain reason. If there is a time, I will also explain. There was a certain political condition which allow him to withdraw the movement, non-cooperation movement. And
you can go on to other people's questions, but that is not my point. I just wanted to make this clarification. My point is not whether Gandhi took this on moral ground. What I was saying was that Gandhi had always
because sir, can I come in between? Yeah? Anyhow,
you go on to other questions. Yeah,
we have lots of questions lined up, so I request.
I have already said. I have already said. Yeah.
Sorry, Vikas ji, if I am not.
No. You go on. Go on.
So first, I would like to ask Nishikant sir, how many questions does he propose that he can answer today, or by the time limited?
Okay, means even 10 to 15, 10 minutes is fine, or I don't know in 10 minutes how many question I can.
Riddhi, I think we can have 3, 4 more
Ah,
questions, and I think Dr. Nishkant would be happy to address that.
Okay, sure, sir. I would like to invite Dr. Narottam Vineet sir from History Faculty of Dayal Singh College.
Yeah, actually, Professor Nisikant Kolge have started his lecture by citing the history of non-violence. And India has a long history and tradition of non-violence, but I have a different take. Being a student of history, the creation of myth of non-violent ancient India was some kind of product of modern socio-political construct. If you look at the history of early India of over more than 1000 years, political violence in ancient India is very much documented not only in epics and religious texts, but also in political treatises, plays, inscriptions, and also in art, especially ranging from 600 BCE to 600 CE. And if you look at the etymology and meaning of the word duty or dharma and renunciations, all these were the part of the discussions of the political treatises, but the issue of punishment, war, forest tribes, royal hunt, and so you will find in a very detailed fashion. And one more important point is that all the non-heterodox sects like Buddhist, Jainas, and even the pacifist Mauryan Emperor Ashoka also recognized the absolute non-violence was impossible for the kings. So my take is that the myth of creation of non-violent ancient India is ahistorical, and we have a very long history of violence ranging from political, religious, social, and so forth. So, what's your take on
okay.
this?
Okay, thank you, doctor, for this interesting question. Sorry, if I sounded like that, I will say it was my mistake. I did not say that the non-violence was the dominant character or characteristic of the ancient past. I'm quite aware of the all the things you have said, that non-violence, violence was one of the defining feature of the ancient Indian society, and it was prevail in every aspect of life. I am aware about the atrocities done on the Dalits, women's, Dasa, Dasu, and I know this is good. But what I was trying to say, there is a recognition and one school of which accepted non-violence also. We have an understanding in Indian tradition, have an understanding of the non-violence, which were more rigid than what Gandhi proposed in the modern time. That was my submission. I did not mean to say that what you said is a myth of modern time, that Indian society was very beautiful or very peaceful or very non-violent. That was not my
Uh,
Thank you.
I would request the person who's asking questions to be a bit brief, and also I would invite some questions from student side. So I've read so many questions students are they are asking in the chat box. I would request them to unmute themselves, introduce themselves, and then ask question to Professor Kolge. I think last 2 or maybe 3 questions,
yes.
Professor Kolge would be
Yeah,
happy
thank
to
you
answer.
for suggesting.
Sure, sir. There's a question by Ishita Roy. She said, Ishita, would you like to
Yeah.
would you like to unmute yourself, or should I speak out your question? Okay.
It is good if Ishita herself asks them.
I think she's having some technical issues.
Please read.
She's been having some technical issues. Her question is, Sir said Gandhi lived a double standard in terms of that he knew that he couldn't expect the same from others to do the things that he himself is doing. But he did impose his thoughts and asked women to sleep with him only so he can test his experiment on brahmacharya. He also asked his married friends to practice brahmacharya. In terms of double standards, he was discriminatory towards blacks in South Africa. It was only after he was thrown off the train's first class when he started a movement against racism.
Okay, Ishita, thank you. But again, I think what the pattern I have found in the question, there are the multiple question actually. So Ishita, I'll just say, actually at very beginning when entered in the South Africa, after within a week actually he was thrown out of the train, and actually it will be wrong to say actually he fought against the kind of racism you are talking. He was fighting actually in South Africa for the some civil rights of the Indian community in India. He did not fight for the against the removing the black racism, but he was not racist. I have a paper on it. It's available freely on internet. Was Gandhi a racist? You can find. So that is just I wanted to make it clear that within a week he was thrown out of the train, and second, he actually fight in South Africa not against the way we understand racism. He fought there only assuring the certain civil rights and privileges for the Indian community in the South Africa. His struggle has nothing to do with the blacks, but he was not as racist as many have argued in my own understanding. And what was the another woman sleeping with the woman? Yes, it is. I studied these aspects and I could not make proper. I have one paper also where I mention about this. I yet to. First thing is that I never appreciate and justify this Gandhi's act. Yes, in no ways it can be justified by sleeping naked with the young woman, naked maybe in open places or in a way, because what kind of psychological effect those women might have, it must be terrible. But I just also want to clarify 2-3 things. My wife is a very strong Ambedkarite, and we generally have a debate over different issues. So she also made this point that Gandhi was sleeping with the. So in common language, actually, we talk about sleeping with the woman means sleeping with someone means having the sex with that person. But you may not be having the same idea. But I just wanted to clarify. Sleeping with he was actually sleeping, not having the intercourse with the woman. This is just one point I wanted to make. And Ishita, I also doubt, I'm not sure to accept your position that he forced a woman to sleep with him. Actually, what my limited reading on this topic, I think there is a Nicholas Geer's one book and one article was Gandhi a Tantrik, and he has a from Buddha to Gandhi on non-violence. He makes some remark. Actually, he is arguing, and I also read there was many women actually fighting to sleep with him. It was not the case he was forcing women to sleep in. There were many women, and Gandhi has to exercise his judgment and ask not to sleep with these one and not to sleep with these one. Women were in quarrel, and they have internal politics because they want to sleep. Again, I'm repeating, I'm not justifying this act. I'm just clarifying certain facts. The point you made that he imposed, and you had given this example. My limited understanding, he actually did not impose or force any woman to sleep with him. Women willingly sleep. It's a complicated, but I repeat, I am telling that this act is immoral, cannot be justified in any way, whether it is done by Gandhi or any other person, because it can have very very destroying the psychological effect on the young woman mind. But I will say it was not forceful act. Gandhi, women were willing to sleep with him and participate, if you want to call quote unquote its experiment. I hope Ishita received my answer.
I'm sure she did, sir. The next question is by a student of history department itself, Purvai. She asks, I'm interested to know about Gandhi's position or views on a classless society, keeping in mind his criticism of class struggles.
Sorry. Can you repeat question? I need to his
Sure,
views
sure.
on.
His views on a classless society, keeping in mind his criticism of class struggles.
Actually, it's not very clear to me. If you can ask her to unmute and make a little more what actually she.
Sure, sir.
If Purvai is available, she can ask it directly. Purvai, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
So what I'm interested to know is when Gandhi mentions in his view of trusteeship, he staunchly criticizes the class struggle and he calls them quote unquote, I say, violent, and he basically underlines cooperation between classes. So how he stands on a classless society in that terms while he criticizes class struggle. So I hope this question is clear.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm yet understood your question, but I'll say something. There is a clear, not much clarity even in Gandhi, as you also trying to say. See, Gandhi, at one level, you will say that Gandhi did not actually attack on the class because his trusteeship accept that there can be a rich people or poor people, and rich people can have or capital. You can want to use the word capitalist or zamindars, and he is suggesting that. Suggesting that they can hold private property more than their requirement, but use as a trust. They should be act as a trustee and use those property for the welfare of the people. So in that way, definitely he is accepting different class in the society, and he is not actually talking about the classless society. So in one way, you can understand these things that he is actually talking about in the way the Varna is sometimes proposed, that you have a division in the society, but there is no hierarchy in this division. Or so in the same way, in economic structure, Gandhi is talking about there can be a different class, but there can be a mutual harmony and understanding and no hierarchy. But I will say this is not proper ways to understand Gandhi's idea of trusteeship and Gandhi's idea of economic. First thing is that, as I repeatedly saying that Gandhi was not only a Mahatma, he was a very shrewd politician. So when you need to understand when Gandhi proposed this idea of trusteeship, what was the context? It was the time when the Marxist ideas were in fashion, and almost every youth was the Marxists, and every politician, even within Congress, there was a strong lobby who was supporting the Marxist ideas, and they were talking about after independence, the zamindari will be abolished, the capitalism will be ruined, and there will be state socialism, and so on, so forth. So during this time, Gandhi proposed the idea of trusteeship. So it has a political implications and political implication. It is not innocent philosophical idea. That is what my affirmation. But if you really want to understand Gandhi's economics, I will say there are the 2-3 key concept rather than the trusteeship. Trusteeship can also be understood in more philosophical ways, but right now I'm not going. So for him, decentralization is the key. Production of the, so he will say mass production of the production by the masses. So people should produce their requirement, whatever they require, or at least at the village level or at the taluka level. So decentralization is the key to understand Gandhi's economics. Second thing is that the production by the masses, not mass production. And third thing, a methods or economics which realize the autonomy of the individual. Individual is not treated as a part of the machine, but as a full-fledged human being. This is the way I understand Gandhi's economic, and in that way you can have the idea of the classless society in the Gandhi's way, not the way I'm the trustee in the trusteeship, where you have the zamindar also or the farmer also, but no hierarchy and harmony between them.
I think with this, we should move forward to the last question of the session. And I
Yes.
would request all the students whose question is not being addressed, since Nishikant lives nearby to our institution, CSDS is at the walking
Yeah,
distance. So they can always visit to him and learn many more things about Gandhi.
sure.
So,
I'll very happy to see student.
yeah.
So
So Shambhavi, let's move to the last question of the session, and then you can invite Professor Ajit Jha for the vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. So I would like to take up a question that Mr. Charchit Gangwar has raised. Charchit, would you like to unmute yourself?
Shambhavi, he did say that he is having some network issues, so you just take up his question.
Sure. His question is, नमस्ते महोदय, मेरा प्रश्न है, जब पूज्य बापू पूना में दलितों के लिए अलग निर्वाचन क्षेत्र के अधिकार के विरुद्ध ये मानकर अनशन पर बैठे कि इससे अछूत हिंदू धर्म से अलग हो जाएंगे, हिंदू समाज और हिंदू धर्म विघटित हो जाएगा, तो वे किस हिंदू समाज की परिभाषा देते हैं? वो समाज जो हजारों वर्ष से दलितों के शोषण का कारण बना, फिर उस हरिजन शब्द की क्या प्रासंगिकता रह गई जब हरि के जनों के साथ ही ये समाज अमानवीय बर्ताव करता रहा और उस अनशन के दौरान भी सवर्णों ने कई दलितों की बस्तियां फूंक दी.
what is his name? Sorry.
Churchill.
Churchill. Yes. I think it would have been better. I should have spoken on my book Gandhi Against Caste or Gandhi or Caste, because most of the questions are from related to caste system. Churchill, it's as I think you must have got the idea that I'm trying to say that Gandhi is a complex man. So and as everyone is complex, but he is more complex in ways that he was involved in many other things. So it's not that easy to answer. I have written in detail about the Pune Pact and Gandhi's take on it and its impact in detail. So, but you asked that what which Hinduism Gandhi was talking about. So, see, if you will read, actually, he was not an orthodox Hindu, as you may understand by any orthodox Hindu, and he respect every religion, and he was quite aware, as you said, that the atrocities are done on Dalits, and he was, if you believe me, if he was not so much concerned about the saving the Hinduism. I know I sound very odd because you have been reading all the different things what I'm saying, but I will request you read one of my lecture in where it was Karnataka. Someone also asked me that Arundhati Roy has a different take on. I have written reply to the Arundhati Roy also. I said I read her also, and I also did my study, and I find that my position is more logical. That's why I accept that thing. But I can change if I find the more evidence. So I'm not telling that the my Gandhi is the correct Gandhi, or others who spoke said that Gandhi believe in caste system is a casteist and there is a wrong Gandhi. I'm requesting you, Charchit, you read their work also, read my work also, and then make a sense which look more logical and sensible. That was I would request you, because you ask a very difficult question which cannot answer in a few words. So again, I'm telling, he was not concerned only to save the Hinduism. If I'll give you one or two quote, if I don't remember, he said, if in the process of removal of untouchability, if Varnashram Dharma goes to dog, I don't care about it. Actually, he several times also said the, if in Hinduism die or untouchability leave, I don't want such Hinduism. Actually, Gandhi stood for the certain values. Again, I am coming back to my old point. He articulated his struggle in that ways as a moderate to then gradually going to the extremes, because he knows the radical section of the society and very large section of Hindu society whom he want to change, or whom he want to convince that these are the unhuman practice and should not be done. He need to take them into confidence and go slowly. So that were all part of strategy, but in personally he stood for the certain values, and one of them was autonomy of individual. I will say you may not agree, most of them you are not agree. He don't bother about saving Hinduism. He was not much concerned about making India independence. He was more concerned about empowering the last man and making society most peaceful and harmonious. So I don't know if I have answered your, sorry. I'll request you to read my book. That's only I can say. I think I stop. If he has some counter specific question, so I would request Amit, Dr. Amit may have a last few words.
No, he has not responded to the to ask something new.
Okay.
I think we should stop here. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Dr. Kolge. We say in cricket that opening batsmen are supposed to be the most. It is a very difficult job to do in cricket. So you played like both Sunil Gavaskar and Virender Sehwag by defending some of the bouncers and also ducking out to the good deliveries. So now I would request Riddhi to carry forward with the proceedings.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking out time for us. Now, I would like to invite our professor, Mr. Ajit Kumar, sir, for delivering the vote of thanks.
I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. Honorable Speaker, sir, respected Principal, ma'am, Convener IQAC, Dr. Ansu, ma'am, Coordinator of the seminar, Dr. Amit Kumar Suman, Sanjay, sir, colleagues of the department, the audience, and my dear students. On behalf of the Department of History, Kirodimal College, I extend my heartfelt thanks to, first of all, to the esteemed speaker, Dr. Nishikant Kolge, who has mesmerized us with his enlightening speech, with not only his enlightening speech, but the way he answered questions to the audience. So, first of all, sir, I would like to say that what a way to begin with your talk. So you began the talk with the idea of non-violence, as Amit rightly said, that UNESCO is celebrating this year as International Year of Non-Violence, and it's all because of, of course, Gandhi has a role to play in it, definitely. And but then you just tried to make us understand that how non-violent as a tool was utilized by Gandhi in his philosophy by saying that it was a tool for conflict resolution. You talked about various ways of understanding Gandhi, and of course, to name a few, Gandhi's philosophy was actually a mixture of there is no dichotomy of his thought as various historians would have us believe about about the bipolarity of his thoughts when he is known in history on one side by as Mahatma, and on the other side on the other side as a strategist. But then you successfully made us understand that it was basically the mixture of the essence as far as the Gandhi's ideology and thought is concerned. I hope I'm audible. Because there is, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes,
then
sir.
sir, we talked about the positive double standard which we see in Gandhi's philosophy in terms of the principle of coexistence, because suppose Gandhi is believing in his high moral standard, that doesn't mean that he's not going to allow others to have a different point of view. This is what is the principle of coexistence that Gandhi talked about, and that you made us believe today in your lecture. And finally, you talked about the constructive program, and in this program, you highlighted that why Gandhi takes interest in politics. He takes interest in politics only when it guarantees social reforms and so on. And therefore, it reminds me of Gandhi when he goes to London for the last time in his life around 1930, when he was invited by His Highness to have a cup of tea in 10 Downing Street. And I remember he was wearing his own traditional cloth, dhoti, and he was using a kharao. So one of the press reporter patted Gandhi from behind and said, "Mr. Gandhi, is it? I mean, your dressing sense is enough to meet His Highness." Gandhi replied that His Highness is wearing enough for both of us. This is what was his style when you yourself had mentioned, about the relevance of his Swaraj, which is not something which is imposed from the above, which is something to be nurtured from within. But at the same time, Gandhi was very firm in his ideas what he has to say this. And I remember this when this incident takes place. The would-be Prime Minister of England, Churchill, said that who invited Gandhi to this 10 Downing Street? I think the liquidation of the British Empire from India has begun. So it was really interesting, enlightening, sir, to listen to you. You answered all the questions you patiently listen to the questions, and you answer to their satisfaction. So thank you very much, sir, for such a beautiful lecture that we have witnessed today. And then I would like to extend our thanks to our principal ma'am, who has been a new architect of the institution, Kirodimal College. She works tirelessly day in and day night to have engage us in the academic activities as well. And I'll go with Sanjay sir when he said that principal ma'am should be thankful for mooting the idea of having a series of seminar. So I thank you very much, ma'am. And I also thank you very much, ma'am, for your understanding, your personal take on Gandhi as an epical figure. And you talked about the fact that despite criticism and despite contestations, it is very difficult to ignore Gandhi and his ideas. I would like to thank Sanjay sir for giving an opening remark about Gandhi, and sir, you have been an inspiration for us since time immemorial, because you have been your teacher as well. And you said that Gandhi believed in multiculturalism and preached this idea much before it became fashionable in academia. I would also like to thank Dr. Ansu ma'am, convener IQAC, for making or having an collaboration with the Department of History for bringing about this series of lecture. And of course, the coordinator of the entire webinar, Dr. Amit Kumar Saman, should be thanked, because it was really his initiative, and it was not possible. I mean, generally, it is not possible to arrange such seminar in such a very short span of time. So all credit goes to Amit for organizing the seminar. And then I would also like to extend my thank to the audience for patiently listening to the lecture, and then asking questions in a wonderful way. Last but not the least, of course, the heartline of the History Society, that is Legacy, uh, which is the students of History Society. So without their effort, without their contribution, such a program could not have been organized. So thank you very much, my dear students, for being here, and I'm wishing all the best to all of you, because this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. We have another 3 days of seminar. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Coming to an end, I again thank Nishikant sir for sharing his views with us. We do really look forward for further interactions with you. And again, thanks to everyone for making this an interactive and a successful session. I really hope to see you all again in this series of sessions that are going to happen during this week. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you all. This is a small contribution in the form of vote of thanks to Dr. Nishikant Kolge from the side of our students of Department of History in the form of this poster kind of thing, which shall be mailed to him shortly after this, shortly after the completion of this lecture. I think we should end the session today, and I would like to request all of you who are present here to join us on 4th, when we'll be having Professor Upadhyay with us, and he's a very well-known scholar in the field of Gandhian studies. So thank you so much for your patience, patient hearing, and also your kind presence. See you all on 4th at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for delivering the lecture, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, you are not audible, I guess. You need to, so you if you're saying something.